podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. This is Good Brothers, Power and Politics, also known as Ice Cube Saves Black America. Let's get into the show. Button. And then we'll go, peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother.
My man. Look, first of all, this is the first time we've recorded since your degree day. Happy birthday one more time.
Man, I appreciate
you know
it, man. And I'm deeply grateful for the love and appreciation and for the shout outs, yourself, you know what I'm saying, our brothers, as well as everybody who did it, man. One of the things, really trying to practice a degree of gratitude this year and practice a degree of being centered and being in the moment versus like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, it's my birthday, whatever. Like, no, okay, people thought to send you that kind of thought, send that energy and put that out there for you. So I want to say thank you, and I'm grateful for the process. They say 40 is an old young man or old young person, and 50 is a young old person, right? And so 40, 44, 45, 46 is when that's true. That if those things are true, between 44 and 46 are the true pendulum.
Yeah, this is the angle. This is where the bend or the spin in the in the road. These next three.
Yeah, so you know what I'm saying. Just dealing with that, but yeah, definitely appreciate it.
Word. So, I mean, I would have. There are many things one could talk about, but I think nothing is more salient at the moment. And bringing together a nexus of politics, community, gender dynamics, the role of arts and activism. Then Ice Cube this week, at least in the way it appeared, was involved in some exchange that resulted in Trump administration or platform, campaign still basically thanking him for his contribution to their plan. He has been, for about the last 2 months, doing through his own media platforms, speaking of what he was calling the contract with Black America. Now, I remember there was a previous iteration of a campaign called the Black Contract with Black America by some other folks.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any interconnection between those two conversations. I don't think there is from the way it appears. And as you can imagine, hysteria, anger, Ice Coon hashtag erupted on the internet. Dynamics of Black men and their to whatever slice, and it is a slice. It's a little slice, y'all. Little slice of Black men that seem to be pro-Trump. Even though the brother, to his credit, he did not say he was necessarily pro-Trump, but when we get into the concepts of politics, we can parse out the difference between one endorsing something and engagement and how those two things differ. But to say the least, I felt like our brother, I like Ice Cube's music, at least the stuff up to Death Certificate, you know what I'm saying? And maybe a little bit of Wicked albums after that, not so much. But, you know what I mean? Up into there, the man who made, who said bird in hand is worth more than the bush. You know what I'm saying? A fantastic analysis of, of the economics of the gray economy as it pertains to crack and education. And also the Dead Homies, you know what I'm saying? Which was another fantastic, among some others.
And the song,
also,
and the song he talked when he did the when he talked about how they went out to Kansas City
Summer vacation.
Summer vacation with the drug culture the gang culture from LA that connected with drug culture in other places.
Yep. Right. So the man, the artist that brought us that also brought, apparently he was in the crib and either he was pondering on it or got inspired, whatever the case may be. And it's unclear if he went by himself and had these reach outs and, efforts to engage the Biden-Harris campaign and the Trump-Pence campaign. But in some form of fashion, there was a meeting and he came out with the thought that some of these ideas were going to be implemented or put on the platform of the Trump campaign. And as one could imagine, everybody went bananas and angry.
Yeah, so I think one thing about that is in Politico, and I'm sure you could throw it up in the joint for folks to check out. Politico kind of has the story, and the story is classic politics, right? The story is like, we always know about rappers, but we never know about rappers' business partners, right? And their rappers' business partners are often white men, right? I mean, you got LeBron and Maverick and all that kind of stuff, right? And Rich Paul, but a lot of wealthy black men, especially rappers in particular, which I think is really germane also to the record industry, right? And the film industry, two industries that, as far as the leadership of them, are usually the exclusive domain and leadership of white men, right? So the story just talks about like him and his business partner and these back and forth conversations. You know what I mean? So, I'll share your link and just you could put the link up. I do think it's good for people to get context on how it happened because, and I know we'll get into it, I do think the perception is like he was out hawking his wares. You know what I mean? Which I think is a different dialogue and it doesn't reflect how power functions. But yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I've tried to read them. I haven't read the Politico joint, so I'm going to read that one. I've read a couple other pieces or some coverage of it. And, the first thing I thought about was, or wanted to know, because I think it's important in these things. It's like, if we're going to analyze and criticize whatever happened, let's think about, I would like us to think about it from what do we want to happen if we're going in some form of political, economic, whatever level of advocacy for Black people as a whole and other people who may ancillarily be connected or benefit from those changes in terms of a constituency. And even if you're just going in for something for yourself, right? If you is in a very narrow self-interest, I need this so I can do this maneuver or business or whatever I'm trying to create. What are you going in with? So my first question was did you go into a meeting by yourself? Please tell me you didn't go into a meeting by yourself with the campaign staff of one of the, probably most definitely a campaign that was going to spin whatever meeting you had into something as a positive for them. Even if you went in the meeting and cursed them out for 45 minutes. They're going to turn around we had a spirited discussion with a key representative of the Black community. Came out with some learning insights. You know what I'm saying? There's no way they're going to frame anything that happened in that conversation negatively. They're going to frame it as if whatever they did was a win for them and a reason why you, especially you as Black people, should look to them and go, yeah, Black people, see, we met one of your great artists and we came out and he was very receptive to things we're talking about, right? So my first concern was, did you go in there and have a meeting by yourself? Because please tell me you didn't think that you could do that and it would not be, you basically whatever happened would be manipulated, in the most negative, in a negative way in the context of even if they didn't promise much, that they would make it seem like they promised more. Right. Or the other concern for me is if you go into a space like that and you don't have any apparatus, machine, constituency, or body to hold any of those promises actually accountable, meaning that you have some way to go, yeah, we went in, this is what you said you was going to do, and here, and not just in the people going to make public outcry, but in no, there's actually going to be a penalty or harm for you into what you need to do. right, if you don't follow through on what you said you was going to do, you know, for my constituency. So that was like my first thought. Like, you know, that's where I landed. What was some of your thoughts of what came to mind for you?
It's a couple things. For me, the first thing is the challenge of speaking for Black America, right? Mm-hmm. And so Black America, outside of the pernicious impact of white supremacy, which you can't say is outside, but for the sake of this conversation, Black people run the gamut and spectrum of needs like any other community. One of our biggest challenges is anyone or any group of people that purports to speak for the whole without a broad-based campaign. And I don't care if this is Ice Cube or Black Lives Matter, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you can't speak for Black America. You can speak for a element of dealing with Black America. There are Black people who their biggest problem is, can you cut their taxes so they can hire new people? Right? Mm-hmm. That's their biggest problem. Their biggest problem is they want more off so they can make more money. They feel like you got too many taxes and too many regulations on them starting up a new thing, or the cost of doing business with the IRS, or the cost of doing business in cities is too expensive. Right? That's their biggest problem from their perspective, or the perspective of, you know, what Black people need, right? Which I'll go into in a second. But I think like that has been one of the things here that we've been talking about. And so everyone, the first thing they say is, well, Ice Cube, how'd you go in without the people? To your point, Just. But then here's the challenge. Al Sharpton go in with a National Action Network, right? Mm-hmm. Floyd Flake go in, you know, for the brother from the pastor from Queens. This person go in, that person go in. None of them individually represent the collective of folks. Ain't nobody asked me what I wanted.
Right.
Right? I've been Black for 44 years now. Right? And there's been a range of things that I think I wanted at a certain time. There's also been a range of things that I thought were the solutions to get to resolve our problems at different points in time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I may see it differently than I did even 5 or 10 years ago. Definitely see it different than 20 years ago, right? So this idea that anything short of truly broad-based organizing qualifies anyone to go talk to a party about what we need if you're speaking for a Black America is off for me.
Right.
Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Now, if you say I care about criminal justice, fine. Right? I'm with that. If you say I care about economics, that's a little testy because I think, again, different people need different things. Right? Ice Cube is rich. Right? So
right.
Ice Cube's going to tell you the number one thing Black folks need is capital. Right? Because that's what Ice Cube need.
Yeah.
Right? He need capital to create more big threes and do more movies that I'm saying on a positive level would hire more people. Right? So it's all positive. That's his need. He doesn't have a workforce development issue. Right? He's not hiring the guys that you work with. Right?
Right.
He's not thinking about how do you get from $8 to $11. He's not thinking about the balance of guaranteed income with like as a floor, a salary floor, an income floor based on your work. That's not where he's at. And I wouldn't expect him to be there. Just as maybe some people whose biggest issue is evictions don't have a conversation to talk with Black people when they access to capital or international markets.
Right.
Right. So that's like the number one issue to me, like issue number one. The second part I want to talk about is, and then, you know, please add on. The second part I want to talk about is, like you just spoke on, this idea of the Black community as a monolith. Like, we have Black Republicans, right? And I think on one of the other shows, we talked about going back to the 38, when the Republican Party, they do this every 4 years. Every 4 years, they think about, well, it would be great if we get black people. And every 4 years they fail doing it.
Yeah.
And that's not an endorsement of, generally speaking, what the Democratic Party has done in the last 50 years either. But what it is an acknowledgement, now this is my 2A point, is the Republican Party is going to continue to do that as long as there is no leadership truly of the Republican Party that would reflect the idea that they are truly interested in deep engagement of the black community, right? Like a 12-year project. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know, black men may not all be Republicans, but they'll tend to want to cut deals with Republicans. Black women tend to identify themselves as conservative, but would never be Republicans. Mm-hmm. So we know we have these distinctions. And I think when we're having this conversation, to nuance the dialogue of what that means. So 2A of this issue is this. The people who are kind of like not supporting, they're just supporting Ice Cube more than it seems like they're supporting Trump. They're like, well, the Democratic Party didn't say nothing. The Democratic Party didn't do nothing. And that's true. They did kind of give them we'll talk to you later. But the challenge with the Republican Party is just no one informing their strategy, right? Especially a transactional / snake oil salesman like our current president.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Democratic Party, for all of its warts and relative ineffectiveness, frankly, at doing any kind of deep engagement outside of the last 3 months of an a presidential campaign, which is something that we have to start evaluating in a deeper way, because we do continue to get the same thing. They have a lot more stakeholders who have a lot more at stake. So Cedric Richmond and Simone Sanders, right? They can't take what Ice Cube's saying and just put it on a platform. It's been black folks influencing the Democratic Party and turning in policy papers, right? There are just more black stakeholders that have more impact than the Democratic Party, right? So it is impractical to assume that the Democratic Party could just be like, fine, give it to us. We'll put it in a document. That's unrealistic. And for people on social media who think that that's realistic, then you don't have an idea of soft and hard power and political relationships, because you can't. Yeah. Cedric Richmond gets laughed out of a room if he says, "Oh, Cube sent me something," and somebody will say, "Well, shit, Kevin Hart just sent me," you know what I'm saying, something on criminal justice reform. You want to put that up too? Like,
I got this white paper from what's the guy? The one guy, he was Kadeem Hardison. You know what I mean? Like name black entertainer that you could name.
Yeah. Mike Epps want to know what we think about fracking. I just put that up. Like, so it is unrealistic. And I think that is also a part of, again, with the story, it was like, okay, well, what is your expectation of what the Democratic Party is supposed to respond to Ice Cube? Right. And like, it's see, so there's layers here, because I want so the first piece around representation, because, and I'm attached, I bristle at the like nothing has changed conversation, just that whole line of framing the world, because it's like, the laws of physics say everything has changed all the time, so stop on that. But if you want to get into the weeds and the general direction and the spread of change, okay, now I can dance with you, right? If you want to start talking about like relative to where you're at, it ain't much different. Okay, I'll take that, but don't tell me it's not different. Don't tell me nothing has moved or adjusted, or that the actions and acts of people have not changed the day-to-day experience of folks. It does not mean that everything has met whatever the vision that we would want, where we would have the fullest experience of, well-being, dignity and equality. No, we're not there. So when we get into this representation of black people, and it's like through the lens that certain people look at, like, where one, if you're not heavily involved, you may assume that you, especially once one gets motivated to get engaged in any kind of political process, local advocacy, national advocacy, what have you, that like
what you want to say is the new thing that ain't nobody said before. And especially, if maybe you're not, a career academic or career activist, someone who's been, involved. So, like, through the way it can be perceived, and again, this is where the deeper questions about, who Cube's rolling with and other stuff, comes into play. But one to think about, whatever your network of influence on the world is, that, if you're operating in a space, you may know some local people in your neighborhood or your county, municipality, whatever. That's like, oh yeah, that's the people, they be on the boards or they be on the advisory thing, or this is how some other stuff get done. But you can be pulled into oversimplifying, especially when we're talking about a national process, that like, oh, if there's not something significant or specific or something specific to whatever, advocacy group I'm following, especially as this, like I said, and I want to strain it through the lens of like Twitter as a public square. Mm-hmm. Like, it can just give you a skewed idea of like who's actually involved, who's shaping this conversation, and where, everyday people to people who are highly engaged show up, right? And you can really think that, like, every time I see somebody, right, well, you should talk to both parties. I'm like, yeah, like, people know that. Like, that you didn't just crack the atom when you say you should talk to both parties. You know what I'm saying? Like, folks understand that, like, certain dynamics, if you do any study, of policy change in the United States history, which I know we don't study history. I know.
Yeah, I know. I'm about to say, all
right. Just we should make a roll of tape that goes, we fail civics, history, and basic science. But so therefore you would go, oh, well, they didn't think of this. They don't have a plan for us. And it's like, well, they might have a plan. There's some things that are in certain policies that benefit us and other people. And they're not explicitly written as benefiting us, so they will not what? Be kicked out of the damn platform.
Right.
Like, don't you guys, because like we'll get into the thing where we acknowledge the realities of racism and then be like, yeah, and we want to make sure everything in there that's supposed to help black people says black people on it. It's like, so you want to get all that stuff kicked out of the platform? You want to have those things all get particularly targeted and needled by the opposition? Because that's what happens. If you put this infrastructure project with this, and this, it's going to benefit other people too. Like, black people ain't be the only ones, but there might be something in there that's going to find its way to us.
Well, but let me say this. Let me just say this real quick, and just please just put that, because I know you're about to let it happen. That is the challenge of everything today being so performative. That everything has to exclusively say something. So you give the people who actually legislate and people who are executives no leeway. Right? You don't give them any leeway to do anything. Because everything has to say something. So if every activity they do has to be performative, when do they have the ability to trade or do horse trading? Right? When do they have the ability to stick a trailer in at the last moment of a bill? Right? You don't give them any credit for sticking a trailer in the last moment of the bill because you don't want to give them any credit because you don't want it to come out. Right?
Right.
The infamous Nebraska loophole, Cornhusker loophole for the Affordable Care Act is a great example. Right? Like, Ben Nelson did what Ben Nelson had to do for his constituents. You know what I mean? Now, in this day and time, we like saw it. But like, we weren't supposed to see it, I think I talked about this guy, John Burton, Congressman Burton. By some accounts, he's called probably one of the most successful, impactful congressmen in the world in American history that you've never heard of. But that wasn't his job. He's the one that's responsible for wildlife preservation, so much stuff. When Social Security goes up, the cost of living going up for Social Security. I mean, so much that he did. John Burton from California. Nancy Pelosi actually replaced his wife after him. It was John Burton, Sala Burton, and then Nancy Pelosi. But you don't know who he is, and you shouldn't. And every good legislator doesn't have to be known by how many bills say the thing for black people. Yeah. But we are in a time where we expect that, we demand that. And if it doesn't say that, right, we assert that there's no value. But Adam, I just wanted to.
Yeah. Well, it's and I bear witness to the reality that there are points where some certain things should be explicit. Like, right, especially if you ever get this reparations thing figured out. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it should be right on there. But there's other pieces and parts, and even within the construct of when you understand targeted universalism, yes, you know who you're targeting, and we know that often those things that will benefit the people who are most displaced, damaged, or harmed, by our public policy or structure will actually end up benefiting everybody. Like, so let's work on that. But that also that is not necessarily just in the name of the legislation or what's on the bill, but also in the practice.
Right.
Because after you get something on paper, you got to implement it. Right. Like an idea is nothing without power to make it happen. Right. You know what I'm saying? And so if you get on the thing and I wanted to say this, and then there's no follow through to improve, or get the resource or the opportunity to people, you can still be in this, like, you still have to fight. And the general idea that, and maybe I'm wrong for feeling so, like, I try to be very representative, like, of myself. And even when I'm saying I'm speaking to something that where you can take me as an example of, or a representation of Black people, but I also always try to add, like, hey, other Black people may see this differently, and that's all right.
Right.
Like, it's not wrong that other people see this differently, right? Like, actually, and I think for us as a community, and honestly, for what, our representative democracy is supposed to be about, is actually better for everyone if people can be of similar constituencies, similar structures, or what have you, and have differing ideas about how to, get things done or what to do, and then to actually talk about them in the public square, on the public record, and then and jab with the concepts and look at the details, and then hopefully we'll get to a deliberative outcome. Maybe not. That will be the best thing for everyone concerned, right? And I don't really. At times, I wonder if we understand that. Like, I'm okay with people roasting Cube a little bit, because Cube, he put himself out. Like, he said things, and then he put stuff on the table, and he should have known, if he didn't know people was going to come at him. That is what it is, Cube. Like, that's part of the game. Like, you went over there and you took a swing. Some people didn't like it. Now, I didn't see anything in what he said where I thought he was particularly offensive in any way, or like this group X is not looking out for us, like, in a way that would be like a very gendered way, or a very, sexual orientation, something that stood out in that fashion, right? Where I felt like he, was going over and above, but he was definitely, fitting within a certain box in terms of political analysis that was like, yeah, you haven't really thought about the world much differently since 1991 and now. And, I guess that, that's your life. However, it does reflect in, like, the causative action of how you think, what you think is going on versus, what other things might actually be happening. And then speaking to how you think these things, how do you understand how any of these ideas that they put on the table are actually going to trickle down to Black people through any of these government agencies and entities? It's startling at times. Like, I get the feeling that folks, it's like you got to decide, you want to be involved with the system or not involved. Right. And if you're going to step away, and there's a long history of maroon culture, right? Like, I'm going to start structuring some way over here, right, that I'll be as least impacted and least dependent on the rest of this thing around me. And I'm going to take whatever barbs, are required for me to pursue that structure of life. And then on the other hand, like I said, people, what the most ridiculous thing was to see, like, the dudes, who I follow, and I try to follow someone on some of these social media platforms so I can at least get a taste of different mind states, right? And they're like, yeah, see, Q telling them that because this whole idea, this transactional, what they got on the ticket for us, is just like you're reframing the conversation as if it's this super like black people was all waiting on the corner of 12th and MLK for the Democrats to come over and ask them what they want. And then we all waited there, and the Democrats came over. We said, we want this and this, Democrats. And Democrats went back to their castle on the hill, and the black people went back to 12th and MLK, because there's a 12th and MLK somewhere.
Right.
And then we said, let's see what they bring back for us. Like, that ain't how this happens. There's back and forth. There's different levels. There's different people from different social economic statuses, from those who are very wealthy, to those who are not wealthy at all, to those who are highly educated, to those who are not very highly educated, to those who are formerly incarcerated, those who never have multiple generations of black folks that ain't never been to prison. Like, right. There's a whole lot of different variations and degrees of blackness involved in all of these different institutions, systems, and places. And we make this thing all simple. Like, it's like, well, we ain't got no power, or we ain't in these rooms, and we not in this. And it's like, nah, man, we got more black academics in a system that don't want them, right? Or at least where they feel hostile, right, than I think any time in the history of America, right? That's a fact. You know what I'm saying? We have black politicians across different states. We got governors. We got governors right now. I don't know if we got any governors. But then we got state, federal legislation.
Which is a
big one.
That's part of the broader challenge, which I'll touch on when you.
Yeah, I mean, like, so we got all this going on, and at the same time, if you look at the wrong information stream, you can have your perception of like how the communication of what we want boils down to, can I get something on this national or that national platform? And it's like, no. There's multiple inputs of power and multiple outputs of the resources. Like this, that's not the only one. There's lots of ways to organize and get something, or to push some idea or concept that will impact where you live or where you stay or your constituency or your space in the world, in a positive way. And to filter it down into this representative, funnel that's like, well, we need a leader at the top of the thing. And it's like, well, maybe we do, maybe we don't. But actually, all of y'all having different agendas, to me, is like, you represent some piece of the pie of black thought. So get to work on it. Like, just keep going. Maybe if your idea is the best one, maybe it'll win. Maybe it won't. You know what I'm saying? If your machine, your organizing strategy is the most robust, maybe lots of people will be behind it and will not only engage in it in a sort of like rhetoric fashion in terms of like talking about it, sharing about it, but also in the way they organize their lives. Possibly. You know what I mean? Though, yeah, it's frustrating at times, but then it's also, to me, it's like, I don't want to get caught up in like arguing with you about whether or not Cube was right or wrong, because I don't think that doesn't actually help me make the next decision.
It's out of your locus of control, right? That's the other crazy thing here. We're having a conversation about people you don't have impact about. All you can actually do is browbeat other people to say that they are wrong for liking or not liking him, right? So you're debating the public square, not about if Cube is able to do this again, right? You're debating if he was right to do it, and then shaming or supporting other people who say he was right or wrong to do it. So it's actually even less beneficial than an idea of like, we're going to stop Ice Cube from doing this again, or we're going to make sure performers never go and say they represent us. How are you going to do that? Right? Because I tell you one thing for sure, there's a lot of other communities. If the people that are largely responsible for their national organizations or their religious organizations, if they don't come to talk about it, it ain't talked about. Now, that could be good or bad. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, we constantly have this conversation about leadership and kind of forms of leadership. But we're not debating if Cube is going to do it. We're not debating if Diddy's going to say this, right? We're not. We're not debating if Killer Mike is going to have an impact. Because you can't stop it. And it's nothing. Right. Who you going to call to say, Killer Mike don't represent me? Killer Mike didn't. I mean, you was on social media and you like Greenwood. The Trumps think you judge you down with him.
Yeah.
They don't do nuance, right? So they keep keeping on. Okay, they're getting paid. Okay, that's fine. And one thing I want to talk about in that is like two pieces. One is like the unavoidable limitation of a vote in isolation.
Mm.
Again, this is not some crazy statement, but it's the unavoidable limitation of a vote in isolation of all other activities.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, one thing people know for sure, you know who gave you money, right? Like, you know who gave you a gift. You know who gave you a big gift. You know who gave you a small gift. So politicians know when people give them money, right? And they listen to the groups of people who are willing to support them not only with their votes, but with their money. Or, like Ving Ring so aptly said in the South Central classic, guns and butter. Right?
Right. Straight
People know who supports them. If your support only shows up in the public square and not in a vote and not in any other activity to forward ideas outside of the nonprofit industrial complex, why do you think that they're going to pay attention?
Mm-hmm.
Your vote, your perspective only shows up in the public square of an algorithm in one vote every 4 years. So the idea that a vote in isolation of all the other ways that humans interact with representative democracies, to only do that is to ensure that your voice is limited.
Mm-hmm.
To only vote for, we'll not talk about that again, but like, what did you send your mayor to go say when your mayor talked to the president? What did you send what does your governor say? Who's your governor's advisors that are in the room to say, Governor, make sure you say this when you talk to this person? And do they have the best interests of Black people? Whether they're white or Black, doesn't matter. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I am not of the, I support folks in the ability community. Doesn't mean I have to have a differing ability to speak up for people of that ability. I am not of the newcomer community in America. But that doesn't mean I can't speak when we go to someone and say, hey, Mayor, when you talk to this person, make sure you ask this question. So this idea that only people that can represent Black interests are Black is part of this unavoidable limitation of a vote in isolation. Because we're only engaging the system at one portal. The vote and then the public square. No money, no volunteering, right? Your children didn't work for the person, didn't intern for the person. They only know you from a vote. Now, which goes to my second point about every day is not prom night. A lot of us treat every 4 years as prom night. We get all dressed up to have all the perspectives in the world about prom night. Right?
Yeah.
But there's a whole bunch of stuff going on before prom night starts. There's the soft hop, there's the junior dance, there's when someone went to the club. There's a whole bunch of times before you look at this one person one night to determine if they're going to look nice, right? Yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff leading up to that. But we treat this as prom night. So all of us, because I even look back at some of my like stuff I might have wrote like in 16 and 15, and I had a lot to say about the electoral space. Now, obviously, I'm in government, so I engage with state, local, federal. But I just looked and said, okay, I have a lot to say about this. Like, why? Number one, like, why? But two, that's when I was like, okay, see, this is like prom night. Everybody in between now and November blankety blank, when we identify who might have won, and then people will stop talking about it. Yeah. Unless they're talking about the inaugurations, right? This is kind of how we've been conditioned to function. So when you connect this isolation, this like limitation of the vote in isolation, or treating this as an every 4-year occurrence, what you get is a kind of just giving up and being like, well, he don't represent me, but you don't represent me either. And if you talk to them people, you're a coon. But if you talk to these people, you're down with our people. But then the person that is the vice president, y'all said she locked everybody black up. Right? It was only a couple months ago when everybody was saying Kamala was the devil incarnate.
Right.
For locking up half of Oakland and most of South Central. You know what I'm saying? So you only engage in the pageantry. And that's the challenge that Trump in his marketing world knows that there's just a set of people who only want to engage in pageantry. So he treats it like that.
Yeah.
Because remember, what people don't dig is for all the black people that are saying, we don't care about Trump's plan. There are white people who feel better about voting for Trump because he came out with a plan. And I think in some ways, they're the people he's looking for. He knows he's only going to get a certain percentage of black people. But what he also does know that some white folks sitting and saying like, hey, I feel like you hate black people. And I like you because you make me money, but I feel like you don't like black people. And I'm okay with this. I'm kind of okay with black people as long as it don't hurt me.
Yep. Right. That is the thing that like it's like I you know, I'll be wondering about people if they understand. It's like a part of opening the door is like it ain't really maybe if whatever it is you're asking for helps me too, then I'm sure he's like, yeah, put it on there. Right. But the other part of it is to go, no, look, man, I got stuff right there on the sheet, man. We talked to Ice Cube. we talked to this one. We talked to that one. We got the one dude. I don't remember his name. The one pastor that's always like in the photo shoots. With the beard. Whatever that dude's name is. Like he's here. You know what I'm saying? You saw us at. You see my contingent over there at the rallies. They be all hype. You know. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think we don't understand, we don't always appreciate, because I'm not gonna say we don't always appreciate how little bit, what little teeny tiny bit of cognitive space you need to create for when the person's questioning, that they look and they go, well, I mean, them black people look happy, and I guess it's cool because I know, I mean, he hasn't really delivered this stuff he said he was going to deliver, but I know he's trying hard, and so I'm a vote for him again, because. You know, because we'll do this other thing sometimes, and we'll go like, you know, government doesn't do this well, and government's failed at this, and this. But we do all this. We talk about all this as if government is operating against itself in the world, and not operating with and against people, right. Like and other people's different vehicles and means to harness and direct power over resources, you know, influence, space, and place. Right. I'm reading through Power Broker, Robert Moses.
Yeah.
It's long, but it's fascinating.
It is.
You know what I'm saying? Because like the part I'm in right now was talking about the, you know, when he starts to take over parks, right? But how land was controlled, you know, between farmers and the super duper wealthy. Like if you was a city worker, wasn't no land, you couldn't really. Not only was it not easy to move around, you literally was like, nah, you're not welcome. And we hold all this for us that live out here that own this land. Even if the people who relatively economically would be close to each other, you're not welcome in our space. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, so we could have this perception of like, oh, well, you know, America just down with freedom and everybody moving around. And it's like, but in practice, a lot of American history is sort of like, yeah, you free to not ever come over around here. Right. Like, you know, like, and we can have this perception now where like you can, most places in America, you can get in the car and drive where you want, get off at the Flying J in the middle of, you know, anywhere in America, get a Subway sandwich and it not be that big of a deal. Right. You know what I'm saying? But there's a whole lot of American history where, nah, you couldn't do that. If either one, you didn't have the tools, so the infrastructure wasn't there, or two, the will was not there. I mean, if you was floating through town, like, hey, I'm just exploring the great streets, the great roads of this free democracy of ours, we would be like, well, take your free democracy and get up on the hell out of this valley. Because we don't know who you are and we don't want you here, right? So like when we get into the rural divide, city divide, like that ain't no new thing. That's an old thing that still rests, at least in this is Raji analysis, in the vestiges of what one thinks they're entitled to if they own land. You control land. There's you know certain ideas that certain egalitarian ideas that the American experiment pulled and and then took from the indigenous cultures of this land. They said, oh yeah, we like these egalitarianism and do what you want, but we still like a little bit of this feudalism. You know what I'm saying? Where we're like, yeah, I mean, well, you know, I mean, I'm happy as long as you stay on the road, but don't get too close to my farm. You know what I mean? Or don't get close to my tree preserve or whatever thing I have somehow either been given by the state or I've, you know, through nefarious dealings, you know, beat somebody else out of, you know, on a contract or a loan or whatever. Like, and so when we start to talk about like in this present day of time and shaping, you know, what people are going to like, where people are going to go, what they're going to do, you know, how they're going to build a different world, how they're going to structure an economy, and you're talking about power and influence. You know, you have, you know, if you own certain resources, you have an asset of some kind, then you have a leverage.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Where somebody will go, oh, well, you know, and that leverage could be in the actual owning of something like land, or you own boats. Like you have control of you got the best trucking company this side of you know, I-5 or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Also could be you're the head of a giant church that, you know, has 5,000 parishioners. You know what I'm saying? Like whether the church wants to be we think that's appropriate or not, it's a reality.
Right.
You as that individual have influence on that constituency. Like people at the end of all of these different fulcrums of power are usually people or things, and then the things are only really that much valuable as they pertain to their influence on people. Right? But we will talk about government like government just, you know, could flew in on the mothership, and now it's having this power dynamic. But no, like government is actually government intentions as directed of some constituency of the people who empower that government are also fighting against other ways that people are organized, you know, to control the way things happen. And, you know, I don't know if there's a better, you know, some other way to articulate that someone else could do. I would appreciate it. But I think it's important for us to not get like stuck in this silly loop where we're going like, yeah, man, because somehow the government is simultaneously trying to destroy me, and simultaneously the government is trying to give power to these other people and not destroy them, but it's trying to destroy us all. But it's like, yo, man, what people framing the conversation for you wrong. What do you want? Who do you represent? How are y'all going to get there? Is it just you? Because if it's just your vote and your vision, you know, you're probably not going to make it very far unless there's other people that align with that vision.
Well, I mean, that's the broader thing about the relationship between, as you said, the public square and then organizing. And then the various forms of organizing to communicate with institutions, right? Whatever institution that may be, about your interest, right? And then again, the idea of the most popular person, which is happening in our community, the most popular person is the person that gets to talk, right? The person everybody likes is the person that people gets to talk. That's never meant that's the person that has the strategy. Now, I would argue the civil rights movement was a balance of the person who had access to systems because of the internal power, but then also, you know, aligned with strategists who were thoughtful, you know, whether they were always right or wrong, right? You know, I think Bayard Rustin is a great example of that. Of, you know, somebody went out there and talked, but there also were people who were thinking about all the stuff and the mechanics of what was happening. And it wasn't based on how everybody felt about everybody, right?
Yeah.
You knew when to push, you knew when to take the deal, you knew when to come back. I mean, that's just part of the dance, right? But when you're not being taught about that, which goes to not being taught history and not being taught civics in a community context, right? Think about it. A lot of Black folks in an urban context, first engagement with government is usually stopping someone from doing something. It's usually stopping someone from tearing something down, stopping someone from beating somebody up, right? So your way of getting yourself from the system is to resist, right?
Yeah.
It's never to that you identify what did you want, and that happened. It was always what was not happening to you. And that sets up our context, and that's what gets lionized, and then people go back to sleep. So we'd be like, you see that person out there fighting for us? That's what I'm talking about. Go ahead. All right, I'm going back in the crib and watch this game. Because he out there fighting, or she out there fighting, or they out there fighting, right?
Right.
So I don't have to really engage in that because this person is the person that's doing that because they're resisting, and we've always engaged with systems based on resistance. And while obviously that's historically accurate, the challenge starts to be that's your only lens of talking about what you want, or we only talk about what we want 4 years in, right? Yeah. Like, we have to do a better job of talking about what's important in the variety, going back to my first point, the variety of things that are important. Because capital is important and workforce is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
They both equally important. Now, does someone know how to do both? No, I mean, they might have to find out. It might show up on a policy platform. And that policy platform might get thrown away a year in. You also have to know that. Look how long conservatives have been waiting to control the Supreme Court.
Right.
You don't get everything you want at first. Right? And the reason they're getting what they want right now, even besides doing some things that are borderline diabolical,
they stayed with the plan.
They stayed with, they knew a plan. What they care about are judges, because judges make laws. And judges preserve or strike down laws. And if we got the people who preserve and strike down laws, that's where we need to be, because all of our issues are mostly value-based things.
Yeah.
And we don't really want you messing with us and importing your values on us. So, It took them 40 years. But they will have a 6-3 Supreme Court. They will.
Yep.
They will have an enduring Supreme Court. And so while we laugh about what color somebody wore to the thing, and if they got children that they adopted, and when it comes from a judge's and legal perspective, they won. And so for me, it's once you separate the performative elements of it and know what you got to do, to, as Lauren said, add a motherfucker so you ignorant niggas hear me, right? Mm-hmm. I understand. You got to add that.
Yeah.
However, what is the broad, enduring sense of power? And are you confident that someone can stop every third Black person in your region or every third person in your region and ask, have they heard about y'all, or they talk to you, and what do they feel? And is that building power in the neighborhood, building power in the community, building power virtually, so that, the bread and circus you engage in every 4 years is actually something that's been building up,
Yeah. So, I think the only thing I would add, and I would call to this, is that I really think the importance of convening people to collect our ideas and us doing it for our own interests is, to me, in some ways, and it might just be my piece of the land that I troll over, I troll through. But even though we've had a couple things here, like, people, you got to convene people, and even for our own selves, say, hey man, what are our top 10 issues that people from the community actually spoke to? You know what I'm saying? Not that we know from data, like, because data is important, and like median income and this and all that. Fantastic. It's very important. But also, when's the last time 500 people from your neighborhood, or a section of the city, direct opinion on something was documented in some way, for their own benefit? Again, not for, because so people bristle when cities or any entity was like, yeah, we're going to do this initiative, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a survey, because people are like, well, we already told this one and this one and that one, and in many ways that is true, or people aren't sure where the information is going. So I think there's a sensitivity to that, but there's also a thing of we do have to have a way where we're convening people and getting their ideas, like, for their own interests, or at least, Yeah, I mean, boil that down into smaller parts. You know what I mean? I think something you said is something that I say to people all the time. I've been black 44 years. I've been in voting age since I was 18. And I've never been, I think maybe once, twice, directly campaigned to. Where like me as black man felt like somebody was like, "Hey, black man, we want to get your thoughts on our thing." Outside of somebody coming door to door, maybe. But and I think there's something significant to that when we get into specifically how black men may be making, like, may look at sort of parts, especially the national electoral process, where even if many may in a similar degree, and even in the voting in the last presidential election, and it'll probably be the same in this one. We're talking about 13% of black men didn't vote, or 11, something like that. Versus 6% of black women didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. All right, so we're talking about 7 percentage points. We're talking about an overwhelming majority, regardless of whatever their individual political thought was, voted that way. Yeah, but we do know that in certain spaces and places, it does get down to percentages, and so then the percentages matter more relative to where you're at. So I would prefer when if we're going to do the discussion of like well, why won't black men vote? It's like, well, why won't this percentage? Right? Like let's get into the weeds. Like, speak to the right and exact. Let's speak to the details, because it's actually important for the change for people to understand the detail. Because otherwise you might develop in your mind this idea that like 70% of black men voted this way or that way, and something. It's like, no, the overwhelming majority actually voted similarly, regardless of whatever their independent, which probably if you had the means to do it, you would find a much more varied and nuanced perspective of politics than what one would assume, right? I'm sure there's folks in there that are like, no, I'm actually really conservative, but I would never vote for that dude. Like, right? There's other people who've been like, what I mean? And so like the think, and I dabble some, and I'm gonna dabble around some more, but sort of like, I worry that the analysis of something like this that goes to, misogyny noir is real. We got our own, special flavor of misogyny. I know that. But I'm always concerned that the way it's deployed, it can miss the mark, or I'm concerned that the voice that you're hoping will hear it isn't going to listen to that. I guess that's the whole point, that they're not going to listen. But I guess maybe even a more proactive say, I would love to be a part of a more rigorous discussion about that, to go like, hey, well, how do we impact that? How do we talk to, and then even to the degree, what is the vehicle right now that's trying to get the political thought of black men across, philosophy, economic, social, political viewpoint, and say, how do y'all see the world? And then and really touching that, because I think there's something, especially in any society where you may not be in the majority as an aggregate, if the connectivity between whatever your population is can really create a different, space of organizing, of being unified around certain issues, that you can operate with a much more powerful impact than you would, as vehicles of your different viewpoints alone, right? Where you say like, oh no, you're strong on the, like, look, all black people need is economic opportunity. So we need low cost loans, we need dope job training, we need no nonsense accountability programs, right? You know what I mean? So the type of joints where like you get super duper benefits if you finish this, but if you mess up anywhere along the way, you got to start all the way over. You know what I'm saying? Which, some people, that's how they see it. Versus, and they would prefer that to, like a UBI structure where you're doing universal basic income. But now I don't want to do universal basic income. I want everybody to have to work for it. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's have the debate about it. Let's talk about like what that looks like. Because the funny thing to me when I think about, and even the undergirding of the argument in our culture, and this is sort of a little bit of a pivot, about like wealth creation as vehicle to sort of liberation for Black people. It's sort of the idea that by having wealth, we'll have a universal basic income. Like we'll have this floor of asset control that will ensure we always have what we need, right? So like we're sort of, at least cognitively, that's how I frame it, right? Where it's like that's the assumption is that if people have control of assets, that they don't have. But me being a student of American history is also going, if we don't have the means for the laws of the land across the different levels of government in operation to protect our right to not have our assets stolen, it don't matter if you transfer these assets to me or if I have a means to acquire them, if then you can just swindle them out of me and no one's going to protect my rights. Right. So like we need both. We need the political power and we also need the things. You know what I'm saying? And then we need the political culture of the society, the actual value, the idea. No, you shouldn't steal people's stuff, which has not always been the case in American history. Like it's been, that's the thorny issue of American history. And sometimes it's like, hey, you can steal their stuff and ain't nobody around and say it's wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't steal that guy's stuff, but you can steal their stuff. Right. So you can swindle farmers whose land happens to be over valuable minerals. You can lowball them or do all sorts of interesting things where you can end up taking their land, but you can't take somebody who's well connected and well resourced money because they wouldn't fall for that. They'd have the legal means. They'd have the means to pay the lawyers, and then they would have the largesse of the state to go, hey, gotta leave that guy alone.
Right.
Like, we don't always, we struggle with that conversation. So,
actual fact.
Yeah, man. Shoot. The one thing I will say that was funny though, also was just people bringing all the Cube's different lyrics back up at them, and it's kind of like, damn, it's a cold world, man. There's never had. If I see another never had dinner with the president tweet somewhere.
I mean, here's my thing, man.
World,
but here's the thing about this society, and it's interesting. In our society, especially when it comes to Black and brown folks, an LGBT community, folks who may have had previous engagements with the quote unquote criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. We say that people should be able to move on past what they said, but what they did and what they said. Mm-hmm. But then we hold him to something he said when he was mad at Eazy-E in 1991. What? Hey, listen, I said something 4 years ago I don't agree with today. You know why? Because I kept thinking.
Yeah.
And I kept growing. So I actually said some things, and in retrospect, I'm like, no, I don't think that. Yeah. When do you stop put people in these holes of like, I don't want the system to never put nobody in a hole, give them all a chance, but no, Ice Cube, no, Diddy, you better not say that. You said vote or die. And why are you talking about me withholding my vote? Because he's using strategies according to the time. Mm-hmm. Y'all are looking for moral leadership from guys who aren't supposed to be your moral leaders.
Yeah.
Like, cut that out. Like, and I'm not saying listen to him, but it's unrealistic to think that someone has said something over more than 10 to 15 years and agrees with everything they said before.
Yeah.
They hadn't seen enough. Like, and again, Cube is not a political analyst to me. He's not like a political economist. Like, care what he said in 1991. He was mad at Eazy-E for having dinner with George Bush, George Herbert Bush. Like, that's an entirely different landscape. And, and I'll stop here. I think at one point we're going to, I don't know if it's as a community or maybe people who are thinking about this, come to grips with the unrealistic expectations we put on the Obama administration, the unrealistic expectations I think that they kind of set up for themselves in the result of all of that. Because I think they created slightly unrealistic expectations. Not because, they had to win. Because even at the end of the day, it ain't like he blew John McCain out the water. He won. Right?
Yeah.
But, you come out with the best political advertising in American presidential history with the hope, right? Yes, we can.
Right.
Taken from, the United Farm Workers Movement and Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, right? So you take like the most gripping political engagement, political marketing, and then apply it to a recession. And then you apply it to the political instincts of Barack Obama, right? Of his own political instincts, and then say nothing of a Republican Party going crazy, the perspectives of what Nancy Pelosi could get through the House, of what Harry Reid could get through the Senate, right? His cabinet. I just think but with all those things, which I can understand personally, I think people don't play out how disappointed they were with what came out of the Obama time.
Yeah.
And I think it can be easy to say, buck up, buttercup. But there's some deeper stuff that electeds and even, sometimes performers kind of felt about that time. And I don't know when that gets resolved, but I think it's a real dialogue. So.
Yeah. Well, I think, and maybe we wrap around this. I think us working on that. To me, that's part of the thing that comes with us, really getting into engaging conversation, as community, within our, our organizing dialogues, where we go man, wait a minute, what, did folks do? I'm sure those in the, I guess they must did a postmortem, but I think they thought they had it in the bag with Clinton beating Trump. Because you won't do a postmortem even when you win,
right?
Not just when you lose, right? So you look back and say what could have been better, what could have been different, and if the things that folks were broadly disappointed about in terms of Obama's presidency, what were you disappointed about, and do you understand why? What things did you think were within his purview to handle? There definitely were matters that he didn't handle well. Some that definitely, even especially looking at the Supreme Court situation, would probably be the biggest thing of just saying, really pushing to make a bigger stink. But also, and this will be my one chest pass to the community. We could have hit the streets them 8 months. Talk about you gonna let him put somebody else in there.
Right.
But for most people, that's almost like an inside baseball nuanced outrage. They're I don't know how to be mad about that. In the way that, it comparatively in terms of the loss of someone's life, clearly we can understand why people will be more energized. But in terms of, your political perspective on the world, there was basically 7 to 8 months where folks could have organized and been in the street no. Nationally, y'all need to do your job and put another person on there.
Absolutely, and I'll end with this. But that's my point of the limitation of the vote.
Yeah.
If we're mad that somebody got murdered by the agents of the state, right? Because that's essentially what happens with police brutality and police murders. They got killed by people who were given special powers by the state.
Yeah.
We know how to respond to that for change. We don't know how to respond and get to Mitch McConnell. We don't know how to respond and get to Ted Cruz. We don't know how to respond and get to them spaces, right?
Yeah.
So because we don't have the tools to fight for those things, we don't engage in those battles. we have to get the tools to fight there as well as we get the tools to fight when someone is murdered by an agent of the state.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we don't do it, what will happen is it'll appear that which is that engages us emotionally will be the one that we engage with, where changing the nature of the Supreme Court and the decisions that come out of it, we may be ignorant to it. So,
Word up. Well, all right. I think we good.
Hey, man, we live to fight. We live to build another day.
Absolutely. So with that, I would say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my brother, I'm Majestic. Again, one more happy and joyous happy birthday to my brother, I'm Majestic. Hope he's enjoying his time off and finding a moment to reflect and have a good time, as it were. Thank you to you, the listener. We create this podcast on a sort of weekly basis, on a regular basis. In addition to the recordings of the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast and our standard interviews, hopefully for you to get a piece and slice of life and perspective and something of value to you. Take the best part for yourself always. If you want to support the podcast, please become a patron on Patreon. Just search Justice Raji or Ask Your Oldhead and sign up, and you can put a little something in the kitty. We keep this here thing rolling. Thank you to everyone out there who is prepared for this and dealing with this pandemic and preparing for this election season. Let's just see if we keep this here democracy rolling. In any event, I want to say one more special thanks to my man, the Crack Man Green Pan Knowledge Divine, who is responsible for some of the musical considerations here on the podcast. You can find me at Justice JUSTICRIAJEE on Instagram and Twitter and all the other machines, and at goodbrothers_pod on Instagram also if you want to leave a comment. Thank you for listening. Peace.